Now let's imagine we have a setup with the beam splitters, just as we had before. Have a beam splitter, a mirror, and a mirror, and some detectors here and here, and the light coming in from here. But now what we will have, and that's an important thing, we'll have a polarizing beam splitter. I will draw it in this way, like a beam splitter with a circle in it. And what it does, it sends vertically polarized photons into one arm and horizontally polarized photons into the other arm. Yes, I'll draw even the letters. So basically it splits the photon into two parts, but now based on its polarization. It's like a recoding of internal degree of freedom into a spatial degree of freedom. Yes. Now let's see what happens in such a beam splitter when we send a photon of different polarization through it. Yeah, so we recall this arm is vertical and this arm is horizontal. Now let's have a photon, it will be in green, whose polarization is absolutely vertical. Vertical polarization of photon. Full photon, just one particle. How it moves through the beam splitter? It goes 100% of its wave function through here. Then on the second beam splitter it gets recombined and goes out. Let's, for the simplicity, without speaking about interference, there is interference, and you can make interference by using another beam splitter which is not polarizing, removing the phase and stuff. But basically this second beam splitter works as a recombination device. It just recombines the stuff, so it would, let's say, it just goes there. Now what if our photon is horizontally polarized? I'll erase the previous path. Now we have horizontally polarized photon. Horizontally polarized photon would go through here, here. It would get recombined, like in some sense. We just say that the second beam splitter is the recombination device, and it would go out through in the same way. Just for the simple case, let it work in this way. Now let's see what happens if we put 45 degree plus 45 degree photon through here. So what we have is plus 45 degree, this kind of photon. It will go 50% of the wave function would go here, and 50% of the wave function would go here. What is important, here would go the vertical part of the photon, here would go horizontal part of the photon. But the main thing is when it's recombined, it goes out as 45 degrees plus 45 degrees polarized photon. Yeah. So basically it went through the beam splitter and then got recombined and came out. Now you shouldn't concentrate on the fact that here something exits. Nothing exits here. It's just beam splitter, polarizing beam splitter, let it be a recombination device. Now let's see what happens if we send minus 45 degrees polarized photon, which is this thing, minus 45 degrees. Pretty much the same thing happens. Like half of it goes here, half of it goes there, and we get back the same photon as it exits. The difference, if you're interested in the difference, you may pause the video and think what is the difference between the two cases here and like right now. And if you think, you will see that the difference is that the state in which it goes would be vertical plus horizontal or vertical minus horizontal. So it's the phase difference between the paths, just the same as we had in previous example of a simple beam splitter. If here we would have a simple beam splitter instead of polarizing beam splitter, and we would be able to erase the polarization difference in photons, we would see interference just as it was in previous cases with ordinary beam splitter. We would see one detector firing or the another detector firing. Everything would work out fine, but it's a more sophisticated case. We will look at it perhaps later, but to the efficiency improving of bomb tester, it's not really relevant. But so that's the main idea. But what is relevant is a question: what happens if we put our 45 degrees polarized photon, through our beam splitter, like plus 45, but here we would put a brick wall, like unpenetrable wall. So what happens is that this part of the wave function, the vertical part of the wave function, hits the wall, and this part of the wave function goes through the interferometer. So eventually we have two types of outcomes. With 50% of the outcome, we just have no photon. The photon is lost. It hit the wall. But with 50% probability, we have photon. But now its polarization is absolutely horizontal. Yes, so this is the way how, of course, with 50% loss of the photon, we can make out of 45 degree polarized photon, we would make purely horizontally polarized photon. Of course, we would lose half of it. In half of the cases, we would lose the photon. But in those cases when it's not lost, in half of the cases, we would get perfectly ideal horizontally polarized photon. And now, pushing this example a little bit further, what we can get is that we can play around with the polarization that we put inside our beam splitter and have interesting results coming out. That's in the next video.